Don't disturb us.
Lever i 4 år i romjul, og kinta jente som var nesten 5. Og begge skulle kledd seg ut med masker, og kom i julebukk til bestemor hem. En skulle vært i 4 år i romjul, da julelysa brente dagen lang. Verda var et hus med 4 vegger, og saligheta var et bestemorfang.
Good morning. It's really great to be here and to see so many people on a cold December morning and on snowy, things that I don't like really. But I was told that, okay, Norwegians really love it, so they're going to turn up at this event, like they planned. The topic of my presentation today, it's going to be what human-centered design is and how it can be used to develop education solutions, especially in developing countries, because this is what Design Without Borders is doing. And as you will see from my presentation, that the visual quality is not very, very like wow. And it's because I am not a designer. You might think so, but I'm not a designer. What I am is something called a design missionary. And it's not just because I look at design as some kind of religion, which I experience also. Many designers might have a tendency to do that. What I see is at human-centered design, it's more of a common sense, which unfortunately is not really very common. So what I see is that how human-centered design and the principle, methods, techniques that it really involves, how it can be really made available to everybody who's developing solutions, these tools and techniques, because they're very important. And I think this is the reason I think that human-centered design should not just belong to designers. It's too important to be left alone to designers. It should be really made available to many people. And this is also Design Without Borders' mission is, because we are really built on the conviction that human-centered design can really make a difference in the world. It can help people improve their living conditions and lift communities out of poverty. So what human-centered design is, and I'll try to, this theme might seem very complex, but I will just, because I'm not a designer, I really would like to keep it at a very simple level. And for me, it's just as simple as this. It's problem solving, focusing on people's needs, wants, and taking into account their context. And at the first glance, it might seem, okay, it's very straightforward. You need to be able to work with human-centered design, you need to have a problem, a defined problem. And that seems like very straightforward, but it is not. We have experienced it many, many times, and this is also one of the examples I'll be talking about today, is usually you think that you have a problem, you have defined, you know what you're going to solve. But when you start working on it, you actually find out that things you have to dig deeper, and the problem is even at the bottom of what you're doing. So given you have a problem, you really need to find who are the people who are actually affected by that problem and whom you'll be providing the solutions to. And it might also be at very, you can jump onto the conclusion and see, okay, people you're talking about, let's just look at the statistics. And IT people and people who are very working on development, they might have a tendency. I've had that tendency that I can look at the statistics, how you see the trends, and you start designing solutions based on that. But when I'm talking about looking at the people, you have to really understand who the people are, and people are different. And you have to really keep the focus on that. And given that you know who the people or users of your solutions are going to be, you have to focus on their needs, know what their needs are, what is the context that his problem is arising at, political, economical, social, it can be so many different things. Stakeholders who are involved in, who will be affected by that problem. And also the wants. People are individuals, they have their preferences of what they like, what they, and if you really focus also on when you're devising the solutions, on what people want, then you might actually improve the uptake of your solutions. And this is also a challenge. And like I said, this self-definition might seem very straightforward, and we all might recognize, okay, isn't this what I'm doing? Isn't this everybody's doing? But actually, it's not like that, because many of us are working on problem solving, but we don't really go into things of identifying our end users, their needs, wants, and context, because it makes it very, very complex. So it's also, like I said, human-centered design is not just something that designers should be doing. Because you might say also that many people, analysts, they are working on identifying problems. Anthropologists, they might be very good in actually working out the needs of people. Wants, that is something marketing people might be very good at. And the context, that can be, depending on what context you're talking about, there might be very many experts in that. So where is our designers in this, in human-centered design? And this is also because designers, they are the people who, in human-centered design, bring back the focus to people, because that is the core of this human-centered design. And they are actually, by education and by their experience, they are trained in techniques that really bring that focus. And how do they do that? Because they are very trained in using the visual presentation, a visual way of communicating. And that is also because visual language can be a global language. It can be that everybody can identify. So if you're working on human-centered design with very many different stakeholders with their different expertise, designers can be the people who can make people agree on what you're talking about and agree on and make process much, much quicker. And also, like the other thing, when you're working on the solving problems, designers are also very good people, and they are also very trained in when you're making the solutions, how you can develop concepts, prototype things, test things much, much earlier in the field, because that can also reduce the risk of uptake of your solutions. And this is also, instead of just going about, looking at the statistics, coming up with solutions, rolling them out, and failing, because that really is huge risk, and it involves a lot of cost. So given that, this is like what I call human-centered design. And I'm sorry, I cannot really, being a technologist, I cannot really help not using the graphs. So I just also wanted to see that how human-centered design has been developing in different sectors. And I wanted to differentiate what is happening in the developed world and what is happening in the developing countries. And commercial sector, the human-centered design, like I define, it's making solutions based on people's needs, wants, and context. In commercial sector, I would say that the development has been very, very steady. And in the Western part of the world, you might say, actually, and I would provoke by saying that there are no really meaningful design challenges left, because the whole society is saturated with the products. And you can talk about commercial services. There might be a lot of challenges for designers to work at. But what we see is that this has been developing, that you're solving needs, you're actually contextualizing your products, you are adjusting them to people's needs. But what we see is that human-centered design, the challenge that they will have now in the commercial sector when it comes to developing products, is taking into account the change context, and that is how you make your products more sustainable and environmental friendly. And there is a huge, huge challenge for designers. When it comes to developing countries, it's really, really lagging behind the use of human-centered design, because they are really at the level where they are still trying to develop products that will satisfy the local needs. For example, in Uganda, there's a big growing community, middle-class community. They have a lot of needs, but they don't have any products. Everything is imported. So what Design Without Borders is also working on, and see how you can, in the local communities, you can providing the human-centered design, you can make the products more, they can meet the local needs. And it also, at the same time, it can also stimulate the commercial sector, because that is a really big aid to developing those communities. When it comes to public sector, the development in the developed part of the world, actually, it's not really that ahead either when it comes to use of human-centered design. The whole thing has been that public services that the governments, they provide to the inhabitants, it's been very much based on needs. But what the context has changed lately is that the whole internet and broadband revolution. And given that, there has been also a need to contextualize service, give them, make them more digitized. But in that part of the world, you see this is like a small knack. is because it's still, when you're talking about use of human-centered design in developing services to public, it's still not focusing on what the context are. It's no focus on users. It's very much IT dominated. But we see it's changing. I see all the time examples where designers are involved in developing the public services, and that's a good sign. And I think it will accelerate, because you'll see the use of it and see how much impact it can create, and it'll improve. When it comes to the developing part of the world, it's really, really far behind on that front. And the good thing about is that it's always the commercial sector that really leads the way when it comes to use of human-centered design, and public sector, it always follows. The good thing about in developing countries is since it's lagging so much behind, so you can always look at this as a greenfield, and it's always easier to implement things in a greenfield scenario. So we think also that once it starts, we start deploying human-centered design in commercial world and the public world in the developing countries, it'll really pick up the speed much faster than it did in the developed world. When it comes to the humanitarian sector, the things are very, very different. It's really at the stage, because what humanitarian sector is, it's really governed by very short-term needs. This is what at least the intention is, but the whole humanitarian sector, it's really paired with the good intentions, and not so much, not always good results. It's the focus on using design. It has been on satisfying very short-term needs. For people who are affected by the crisis, and you're providing emergency relief to, it's about them meeting their very basic needs, about shelter, water, energy, and protection, not the least. So it's the humanitarian sector design, humanitarian design. It's at the very, very start of the process. And like I said, human-centered design, it's also about people. And the people, when it comes to humanitarian sector, it's a really diverse group, ranging from people in the Karamoja area in Uganda who can barely read and write, to people in Syria who are actually refugees in Syria who are really well educated. And how do you actually design products and services to meet the basic needs for the whole diverse group? It's a challenge. So the context, so what I would say is that human-centered design, it's still at the stage where you're trying to solve the basic needs for humanitarian sector. And the challenge for human-centered design-wise, it's going to lie in developing those products for this different context. And it's a very complex problem. It's a really interesting problem, design-wise, because the whole ecosystem of humanitarian sector, it's really complex. You might not see all the details. It's just because people who are buying services in the products in the humanitarian sector, they are not the ones who are using it. People who are using the products in everyday life, they have no saying whatsoever on how this product should be. So you have large NGOs and aid organizations who are buying products and services. You have suppliers who are manufacturing them, but they have no contact with the end users. You have also developers and designers who might have occasional contact with the end users, but not enough to actually design their products. And you have also the whole support services out in the field who are actually experiencing all the problems and know what it is about. And how do you design human-centered design or techniques that can take into account this complex ecosystem? And this is also something that is really interesting, design-wise problem that we are going to focus in Design Without Borders more and more on in the future. And going back to human-centered design, like I said, it starts with a problem. And very often, sometimes you have a problem is so straightforward, you know what the problem is, but very many cases, you don't know. You think you know what the problem is, but you don't really know for sure. It's not unless you start working on it. And there, human-centered design can be a really good technique to actually go to the core of the problem. And this is what I'll be giving you an example. So let me take you to far, far away land, Uganda. It's not actually that far. It's actually getting very standardized, the whole flight route to get to that. It's a country in the Eastern Africa, population of 35 million, bordering to Kenya, Tanzania, Sudan, Rwanda, and Congo. Got independence in 1962. been up and coming. This is also actually really the country where Norway is focusing a lot on the business collaboration and development. Cannot really avoid going to the statistics again, but just I try to tempt the temptation of actually coming up with the solutions just looking at the statistics. But the statistics might be very important to give a backdrop of what we did when it comes to this developing an education solution. 52% of people, they are 15 years or below in Uganda. 70% of the population, it's below 25 years old. So it's a very, very young population. Literacy rate, it's in general in the country, it's low. It's around 67%, but varies a lot. In the northern areas, which are the most poorest and the most deprived area, it's very, very much lower. It's overall a very poor country. 25% on a national average, they live below poverty line. In the northern area, it's more than 50%. So the project that I was actually the story I was going to tell you about today, it's about where we did the designing of financial literacy in Karamoja, Uganda. Karamoja area, it's the northernmost part of Uganda. Like I said, it's one of the poorest areas in the world. Like I said also, the more than 50% of people live below poverty line. And like I say, the whole area has been really affected by a lot of local conflicts, war. The climate-wise also, it's a semi-arid area, so there are very few areas which are cultivable in this whole big region, where almost 1.2 million people live, and there's virtually no infrastructure. That is also one big problem. So, given the climate and also the conditions that there have been people who have been, suffered a lot from many consecutive wars. There has been also many big consecutive droughts in this area that has affected the whole what people were living off in the old times. The society in general, it's very nomadic warriors who have had cattle as a very integral part of their whole economic system. So actually, like almost 40 years ago, when it was the challenge of many wars and the droughts that were at its worst, the problem was that there were many people who were suffering from hunger. It was a really big crisis. And at that point, World Food Program, they really entered this area and they started providing immediate food aid to people who were affected by this crisis. And actually, usually, World Food Program, they run on a very short-term thing. Actually, they go into the crisis area, they give the food aid, and then they pull out. This is usually the intentions is. But this food aid program has been running almost for 40 years. And actually, when you say that also, that this, the problem that has been that there was a crisis and people needed to food to survive, it was supposed to be short-term. It has become a very long-term thing. And given that problem, also, WFP, they started thinking, okay, you're not making this society any sustainable. You're not contributing by providing food aid to any local development of business development or livelihood development. So in 2007, 2008, World Food Program, they started to move from food aid to a program that they call Cash for Work. And the whole idea of that how you give people dignity, that they can actually control their lives, instead of just providing the food aid, that how you can give them the cash that they can really use according to their needs. It can also give the extra effect of that it can really vary their nutrition level. It can also stimulate the local businesses that people can start investing locally, and it will give them also incentive that they actually develop their lives differently, and WFP can eventually move out. But this was the intention, 2007, 2008, and WFP was struggling with the effectiveness of this whole Cash for Work program. So Design Without Borders was asked to come in and help solving a problem that was design a better cash transfer and work distribution system. Because like I said, the whole idea was that people, beneficiaries, I'll be using that word often, they will come to these centers, they will be given some work to ditch, to make some ditches, to cultivate some grounds, to build some houses, just to build their own local infrastructure. And for doing that work, they will get some cash in return that they can use the way they want to. So this was a whole thing, that how you keep track of this both work distribution, but also the cash transfer system. Then again, given that task, that when designers, we didn't know anything about it either. And how do you go as a designer, Western designers, and go into the Karamoja area that can be one of the most isolated and deprived areas and start solving a problem? You had to take into account, if you're using human-centered design again, who are the key stakeholders in this case. And key stakeholders in this case, they were WFP. It was beneficiaries who were receiving this aid, and they were working to get that cash. You have a lot of implementing partners. WFP actually is providing they're giving the whole overall structure to this program. It's the implementing partners who distribute that cash and actually keep track of what is being done. And Design Without Borders, they approach this whole problem by looking at that how a normal service provider provide a service to its people who are receiving that service, and how do you use design to do that. So just to start with, the whole process was that you have some needs for beneficiaries, have some need. You prepare for this system to get in operation. People come to work. You distribute the cash. And by doing that, in this way, WFP meets its objectives. But this was like a structural part of it. And then designers had to start talking to people, focusing on people. All the stakeholders collect stories, what they are experiencing, what are they experiencing, what they think is a problem. And this is some of the part of the stories. They ask beneficiaries at work. This is one example. This woman who is working, out in the field, she says, "I don't know how much money I will get. The office will decide." And she got 104,000 shilling, Ugandan shilling, that is almost 220 kroners, 4 months ago. And that was a long time ago, but she has no idea what's going to happen next. A beneficiary, when they are at the point when they're receiving the cash, he or she thinks, "I did not receive the money I expected. I've been working for a very long time. There's something wrong." They have no certainty in their everyday life. These are the problems that implementing partners were facing. They say, "I use stones to explain to people what they need to do, how when they do need to work, when should they get cash, and how much cash they should work. I do it over and over again, but people still don't understand it." Project managers in the local community or local implementing partners, they were struggling with that. It's really hard to mobilize people. People show up to work on different days, and I have to make sure that their work is registered. Because for these people, like I was telling you, going back to, these are the most deprived people who live from day to day. And for them, this one cross that you don't know how to read that, it might really mean life and death, that they are getting the money that day or not for working. So the small mistakes that can have really big consequences. And people, when they are not showing to work on the right days, coming on other days, then how you keep track of the whole system. And everything was based on paperwork. These, like the forms you see, how they're maintained, how they're updated, and things like that. And just to add on that, some more stories. The people, it's just to give you idea for how people think, how they live, and how they have been living. He cannot count money. He gives his salary to his wives. He has many wives. And just keeping an idea that which one of these wives have many children, he gives them more. This is one part of the group's users. The other part of the users is this woman who saves some of what she earns. And she's trying to educate one of her child to give her or him a better life. So depending on that, this whole user groups, what we actually agreed on, that they could be divided in 4 user groups. There were now people, there were tomorrow people, future people, and sustainable people. Now people, it's really the people who are living from day to day. They cannot think beyond today. They come to work, they don't come to work, or they get this cash, and they don't know if they'll survive tomorrow. Tomorrow people, other people, the example that I showed you in the previous slide, it's the lady who actually has started saving a little bit, even from that little amount she's earning. Future people are thinking a little bit further than that. And the sustainable people, actually, they have tried to break this code and actually come and start save. They have been lucky or whatever, that they have come into a sustainable phase where they have maybe a small business that they are actually making money off, and they can really think ahead. And the whole challenge of this problem solving, it was how do you lift communities who are in the now and tomorrow groups and make them move towards the right, to the future and sustainable. That is the ultimate. And also you have to make the solutions that will prevent that future people don't fall just because of coincidences back to the now group. So there was a lot of insight that was gained from this project, lot of data, which was structured and then analyzed, connecting the dots. Analyzing ideas, and then again, like I said, we were looking at this as a service provision from WFP to all these different groups of beneficiaries. And when we started analyzing the whole problem, we came up that this one factor that came popping in over and over again. And that was that beneficiaries, they did not understand the salary criteria. They did not understand the calendar function, that Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. It was a really strange thing for them. And they did not understand the criteria of public work either. In some, they were lacking the financial literacy. And that was really the core cause of all the thing that was happening. So given this, that when we came to this conclusion, I'll just show you a film.
Uganda overall is lucky in that it's not a country that has a big problem of food availability. It does have a problem of distribution of that food, and it has a problem of many people being unable to access it, meaning they're literally not able to purchase it. So WFP has moved over the past 3 years to giving an increasing number of participants in our projects cash instead of food. And we're very interested in helping people to become increasingly financially literate. So we're very interested in working with Design Without Borders to ensure that people who are receiving cash through our programs are in the best possible position to make decisions about what to do with it.
Design Without Borders offers a new process, the design process, and in this design process the human-centered factor is very important. We're not only going out to the field to ask beneficiaries questions, but we're actually engaging them in the process, in the design process. So we're letting them tell us what the solution is, and we use their input and knowledge to translate it into a new design, a new service or a new product. At this very moment we're developing a financial literacy kit, which is basically an education kit to improve financial literacy skills of beneficiaries. It consists out of 4 elements. One element is like a calendar and training tool, where people learned on what days they have to work in this program, what they earn as a salary and how much salary they make after a certain period. And then the second element is a saving box. Doesn't matter how much they earn, even if it's only a little bit, by putting something aside, they can, at the long term, they can reach something that they always thought was not within their reach.
As you can see, there is a rubber band around this beautiful saving box, and the rubber band has numbers. These numbers represent the amount of deposits that are made.
So each of these is one certain amount. So if they say 5,000, every time they know they earn 5,000, they can move it.
And then the third element we have is a board game, a Karamojang version of Monopoly, where people are taught the basics of financial literacy, like planning, saving, making a budget, understanding the value of money.
They were laughing because they had picked somebody who is elderly who cannot help them in the family. Not okay, somebody who is not productive.
So how much money did the guys?
They have 2,300,000.
Oh wow.
30,000.
Ketanyu ganyu bitolo kutoka mede kwa kutoria mnyeti. Ketanyu ganyu bitolo kutoka toria mnyagamoi. Ketanyu ganyu bite obialarte business. Kodenye bitolo riamnete ngilinga.
And then the fourth element is a wallet or a personal planning tool, which is nothing more than a wallet that consists out of 6 pockets, and every pocket represents a certain budget. They will look into the pocket and see, okay, I only have this amount left, so I'll only use this part.
Can you ask what they think about the pockets? But it could be a little bit smaller here, maybe.
We go into a project with a holistic view that we want to know all the stakeholders' needs and wants, not only the end user is important for us. We follow this up with the idea stage where we work iterative with products, ideas, all from mock-up stage to actually making the prototypes, where we go to the field, test and get user feedback and refine it.
So we make it, I think, 4.
4.
Yes.
Yeah.
Designers use their analytical and creative skills throughout the process. I think that is kind of the key of designers' work.
There's every reason to think that Design Without Borders has come up with a product that communities are really interested in and are responding positively to. I think it's been a really fruitful year and a half of collaboration, and there's very strong interest on the part of WFP to see the financial literacy package made available to as wide as possible a range of other actors.
So, like you saw also, that is, I mean, the stage where we are right now, this product, the whole kit, or at least the board game, had been prototyped. There has been a really huge interest in the whole Uganda to make use of that, because this board game, it's really like a visual tool to help people improve their financial literacy, and just, it's not just going to a training class that is not really relevant in this context. So we are actually going to implement them because with Bank of Uganda, who is actually leading the whole developing financial literacy in the country, they are interested in this. There are a lot of other aid organizations who are actually also interested in using this out in the field, where they're working with the rural refugees. So this is also, I mean, where we are now, that this is actually, we think that this product is really going to be rolled out in really big volumes in the Uganda. But again, we'll be doing it in the steps, rolling out in smaller communities and get the feedback and just see if we need to improve it further. So the journey has just begun. They could have also just shown you a lot of examples of that. The key here is the human-centered design. Don't forget the people when you're devising the solutions. And most importantly, know what the problem is that you're trying to solve. So when you go back, this is all I had for today. So when you're actually relaxing in the Christmas holidays, just try to think which problems you are actually trying to solve through your work. Are they the really problems, or are they the symptoms, actually? So thank you for your attention.